the people who are going to come in late. I thought I would start with a hymn from the breviary. We gather for the Lamb's own feast in robes of grace, from sin released. Through saving waters we are healed, to Christ the Prince our hearts we yield. Your body frail to cross was nailed, for humankind through sin had failed. So that we might again have life, you took upon yourself the strife. Upon the cross your body bent, from wounded side your blood was spent. To serve our souls as living drink, from death itself you did not shrink. Oh, praise to you, O Lord, we sing, for now you are our Passover King. To God the Father be glory, to the Spirit, and to the Son. Amen. Let's pray. Father, you've looked upon us with favor, have shown us your glory in the resurrection, and we declare the greatness of your merciful love for us as we cry glory to you, our Lord of life. Thank you for fashioning the marvels of creation, for endowing us with the wonders of human life, for freeing us from the bondage of sin, for redeeming us by the blood of your Son, for giving us hope through your death and resurrection, for making us children and heirs, for giving us new life in the power of the Spirit, for enlightening us with your truth, for blessing our community with your gifts, for strengthening us this day in your service, for promising us eternal life in your presence. Glory to you, Lord of life. Blessed be you, Lord Jesus Christ. You have walked with us this day, sharing your word, your living bread. Stay with us now as evening falls, that the joy of your presence may burn in our hearts. For you are our light forever and ever. In his name, amen. Vespers. All right, here we go. Last judge, Samson. So if you missed the first part of the class, you missed the last part of the book. Because I started backwards. I started in 17. Mostly for a reason. So can I just tell you that Samson is probably the most well-known judge story. And I think Samson is absolutely the worst judge. Awful, right? I'm still trying to find the redeeming quality. Trying to find maybe something at the end. So after Jephthah, who was very short term, 6 years, you get 3 minors, Isban, Elon, Abdon, that are precursors to kingship. Lots of kids, lots of progeny, lots of donkeys. Right? Kingship. It's coming. The minors are followed up then by a 40-year oppression of Philistines. So remember, in the Jephthah saga, you had dual oppression, the Ammonites and the Philistines. The Philistines are not dealt with in the Jephthah saga. So starting in chapter 13 of Judges, then you get the Samson novella, or the Samson story, or the Samson scandal, or whatever you want to call the Samson life. I call his story sex, lies, and sophomoric pranks, which is kind of the essence of his judgeship. There's some interesting things. Again, like every of these judgeship stories has kind of a piece that's unique and sets it apart maybe from the others. This one is, you got 40 years, you got an ongoing oppression from the Philistines, which, by the way, still they're menaces of Israel up until David. So for a long time, they stay as a menace. One of the things that you do not get in the Samson story is there is no cry out to Yahweh for help. So remember, in the cycle of Judges, you have idolatry, followed by oppression, followed by some kind of sorrow, help us, followed by a deliverer is raised up. You get no cry for help. in the Philistine. As a matter of fact, I would say that Israel, by and large, is pretty content with letting the Philistines rule them. They've just said they kind of took that, well, it is what it is, piece to that. And so you don't get a cry out to Yahweh, but what you get, there is a bright spot in the Samson story, is you get another one of the stories of being a barren, that is a woman who can't have children, to life. And so you get from barrenness to life. And so for the only time in the Judges saga, a judge is selected before birth, or maybe in the ways of somewhat like Jeremiah, from birth. Right? So there's a promise made to a couple who are Danites. So one of the reasons I did 17 through 21 first is, remember, the Danites aren't happy with their land, so they just move. They migrate north. They didn't like the gift of God, and so they're Danites. And they were selected to bring forth a child. God makes contact with an unnamed woman who is the real hero of the story, other than God, and we get a conception story. God comes to a woman and says, "You're going to conceive. Here's what I want you to do." Kind of get that same story with Mary, right? So you get a conception story, and part of the story is that Samson would be a Nazirite, that is, one devoted to God, so a special sect of the Jewish people. There are some things: don't drink wine, don't touch anything dead, don't cut your hair, Nazirite stuff. But really just means to be dedicated, right? One dedicated to God. So what you're going to do, you're going to birth this baby, you're going to dedicate this baby to God. Here will be the sign, right? No wine, no dead stuff, no haircut. That's not all that was. If you want to read about the Nazirite vow, number 6 is where you'll read about it. So it's interesting. The woman, unnamed, the mother, responds faithfully, but the father, who is named, Manoah, is kind of like Gideon. He needs a little convincing. Hey, who is that? And what's this all about? And what are we supposed to do here? And so I think one of the reasons that you get this picture of faithful females, which is one of the congruent themes through Judges, this is the last attempt before it gets really bad for women in Judges to say, you know what? You need to look closely about your misogynistic, oppressive society and what women mean to that society. It's kind of the last bit of that, because 17 through 20, women are treated awfully and even portrayed as being victims. And so there's another interesting piece to that in the Nazirite announcement, and maybe the unfaithful or the uncertainty of the father is the mother does the naming of the child. Names him little son, S-U-N, right? Which is it's Samson, right? Little son. Which interesting. Samson's not very bright, literally or metaphorically, in my opinion. So obviously, I have a bit of a aversion to the Samson. No, there's nothing wise about this one. Matter of fact, there's nothing judgy about this one. Right? He's a playboy who likes to have fun. He's a prankster. He's a junior high boy that never grows up, that somehow God selects from birth to be a deliverer. And so there is a bit of hope you'll get in the Samson saga, like you did in the Jephthah saga, like you did in the Gideon saga, the mention of the Spirit of the Lord upon him. So the Spirit's at work with little son. I'm uncertain exactly what the Spirit had in mind for little son, other to empower little son to be strong. And that certainly happens. Maybe there's more to it. than that. So that kind of gets you through the first part of chapter 13 and what, kind of what's set up. So you got a long-term oppression. You're going to raise a deliverer from birth to. The problem is, if you read on 13:5, he never delivers. He only begins to deliver. Philistia is never defeated. They're menaced, okay? They're angered and they're poked at, but Israel's really never delivered completely until David comes along. So the rest of the Samson saga is about Samson's lovers. So my sex lies and sophomoric pranks starts now. And it's interesting. He's a bad selector of women. He doesn't choose wisely. He chooses poorly. Right? He doesn't choose Israeli women. He chooses Canaanite women or Philistine women. So Judges 14 picks up then with the I call the lover number one, the first lover, the woman of Timnah. So remember that the overarching theme of Judges is that everyone did what was right in their own eye. And so Samson is no exception. He really embodies this thing. Whatever looks good to Samson is what Samson's going to do. He sees this woman, literally, right? A Philistine woman is pleasing. Most of the texts say is pleasing to him or right to him. It's literally is right in his eye. Mom and dad object. Hey, there are plenty of nice Jewish girls here. Why for her? And Samson throws a bit of a tantrum and says, I want her. And guess what? Because I think they're so accustomed to Philistine rule, they say okay. Right? But what they don't know, and what Samson doesn't know, and what we don't know until Judges is written, is that God is navigating this incident, I think, in order to kind of poke the bear a little bit. That is, that God's covertly active with this union of Samson and this woman from Timnah to try to get some stuff started. God's stirring it up. Can I just put it that way? And he's using this playboy and this foreign woman, foreign to the Jewish people, to get some things stirred up. God's working through flawed people incarnately, just like God does now, right, with us. So it's interesting that God is at work, and even though everybody says this is a bad idea, right? Samson, this is not going to end well. Sometimes we know that about our kids. This is just not going to end well. But go ahead. So, but the thing is that God is there, and God is at work, which I think is really important with Judges. God never quits being at work throughout Judges. As bad as it is, God's always at work. So, God's got a covert plan. Samson's part of that plan. And Samson's going to go marry a Philistine woman. And on the way to make all the arrangements, we get the first Samson story that we all know. And we get the first Samson, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. Apparently that meant you can rip a lion apart with your bare hands. Not sure why you would want to do that, but nonetheless, right? Yes, so typically lions are, especially in prophetic literature, lions are there to warn. So in Amos, the roar of a lion is a warning sign. Hey, God's present, you need to straighten up. In this time, in Samson's eyes, the roar was, oh, let's go be a kid. Right? Let's go tear something up. You know how boys are. I just my mom and dad will tell you I could tear anything up or apart. Couldn't put it back together, but I could tear it apart. Right? But you do get the Spirit of the Lord in this, and I think what you get you get an understanding in the life of Samson what the Spirit of the Lord is about. It's about empowering Samson's strength. It's not about holiness. It's not about being obedient. It's not about necessarily following God. It's about just power. Right? Okay. So Samson tears up a lion. There's a couple of things about that. Where Samson is, he's in a vineyard. Now remember, he's a Nazarite. You stay away from grapes. And then he kills a lion. Self-defense or playfulness, I have an opinion. Right. But he touches dead stuff, right? So he's broken two parts of the Nazarite vow. He's going and marrying a Philistine woman, so he's broken the Deuteronomic covenant. So, obviously obedience is not on his radar. It's whatever seems good to him and fun to him and pleasing to him in the moment. That's what he's a reactive guy. A little bit of an adrenaline junkie, I would say, right? But whatever he wants to do, he does, and God provides the strength. So, by the time he's done this, right, he's violated his vows as a Nazarite. But you know what? He's going to get married, and so he's on the way. There's a wedding feast, and the prankster guy comes out. So he tells a riddle, and he makes a bet. Right, There's 30 guys. I wonder why there's 30 guys at the party. It's probably because they're trying to keep Samson in line. He's got a bit of a reputation. I don't know. Anyway, so he proposes a riddle, and part of the riddle was a wager based on the experience with the lion, because when he sees the lion next, there's bees inside. They build a honeycomb. Of course, he eats the honey, which is another violation, right? Touches something dead. And so when he goes to the party, the riddle is a joke. Okay, I mean, it's really a joke. That is, when he says, here's the riddle, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet, that they couldn't, so figure it out. I'll give you a week to figure it out. So there's some obvious answers, I think, for the Philistines they're in the bet for this. One is this. One has to do with the party, and one is a sexual innuendo. The party one is this. Listen, they are living it up in these festivals, okay? Lots of wine, lots of delicacies, lots of good food, lots of revelry. And so one of the answers might be, okay, listen, this is going to be a little gross for those of you watching on the internet. I hope dinner's over. Look, we put all this junk in our body. We're going to puke it back up, right? That's a possible answer, given this situation. The other has very much sexual innuendo, where Samson, right, is the strong and the eater, and so there's a bit of a sexual innuendo. But listen, they don't want to give that answer, right? Those would be the obvious answers for them. They don't know. They think Samson's smarter than that. I have my doubts. So the Philistine people don't apparently losing a garment is a big thing, right? Giving up your wedding garment. I'm not sure what piece of clothing that would be for you, but it's a big thing. So they threatened Samson's wife to get the answer. If you don't tell us, we're going to burn you out, get rid of you. And she wears on him, literally nags him, wears him down. And he finally tells her the answer. And so he's got to pay up. You lost the bet. So what's he do? He's got to settle the bet. And so he does what I call a 30 for 30, right? he's got to come up with 30 garments for the 30 guys. And so he kills 30 people. Just like that, right? And again, in verse 19 of chapter 14, you get the Spirit of the Lord comes on him again. And he goes down to Ashkelon, and he kills 30 people. And he took their garments, and he pays off his bet, and he's spitting mad at his wife and his in-laws and the situation, maybe even himself. I don't know. I doubt it. So he goes home to mom and dad for a while, leaves his wife behind. Problem is, there's a problem with that. Samson's father-in-law is not overly thrilled with the 30 for 30 event, apparently. And so he, for all practical purposes, he annuls the wedding, and he gives the wife to be married to what we would think about in our culture as the best man, right? Hey, Samson's gone. He's not that great of a guy. Look what he does for fun. He kills people and steals their clothes, and he kills lions, and so he annuls the wedding. And so then you get prank number 2 with Samson. So prank number 1 was the riddle. Prank number 2 is the revenge. By the way, no deliverance yet, right? You get revenge, not deliverance, which is a very common theme in the Samson saga. So I call what he does is foxfires. So now, how in the world? I'm just trying to think about this. So he goes back to his wife's house. Father-in-law says, "Hey, sorry, gave your wife away to your best man. I got another daughter. How about her?" Which, by the way, speaks to the culture, how women are seen in that culture and in that world, and that's how the Canaanites, Philistines see them. That's how Israel eventually sees women too, which is part of the story of Judges. So just take my other daughter, and Samson said, I can't let this go by. So he does something. He grabs foxes, and he catches 300 foxes, or jackals, depending on which translation you have. Now, how do you catch 300 jackals? I don't know. Is there a jackal call or a fox call? Right. Do you just run them down? Do you grab them by the tail and throw them in a trash can like you do an armadillo? Right? I don't know. What do you do with them? How do you catch them? He does. He catches 300 foxes. He ties their tails together. He catches them on fire. And he does something to the Philistines that the Midianites did to Israel. The Midianites attack their fields. They starve them out. When Gideon's the judge, he's, you know what? I'll just start destroying your crops. Is that a prank? I guess. Right. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like, right? How you tie foxes' tails together, set them on fire, and send them out. No video. But I'm guessing it would be kind of comical, right? And its own. So part of Judges is dark humor. This is part of the dark humor of Judges. It just has this. I mean, who would think to do that, right? I mean, why not just go put a torch to the field, right? But he's a kid, right? Sophomore pranks are his specialty. Just an overgrown kid at times. So he does that, sends them out. Who did it? Samson gets the blame. By the way, he says, if I do this, I'll take the blame. And so the Philistines do eventually what they promised to do before. They went ahead and kill his in-laws. They burn her out. So you got fire for fire. So you had 30 for 30, right? Garment for garment. You got fire for fire going on. And so Samson reacts. He takes revenge. Again, revenge happens. And we have an unnamed number. So he killed 30 the first time. In 15:8, he strikes people down, hip and thigh. I think really he beats them to death with their own bodies. Almost. I mean, it's just brutal, right? And he hangs out at a place then called Birds of Prey, which is what he is, right? He's a bird of prey. Samson takes revenge. One, he hides out. The Philistines don't go after Samson. They go to the tribe of Judah. They go to some Israelites, remember who they rule over. And it seems like that Judah they recognize that the Philistines have us. And they turn Samson in, right? Samson kind of gives himself up. They turn him in. They turn him over. And this is where we get the other famous story of Samson that we know, and that's the jawbone story of the donkey. He goes, and the Spirit of God comes on him again. And they're at a place called the Curse of the Heel of the Jawbone. And, Samson's captured. Again, empowered by the Spirit. This time he grabs a jawbone of a donkey, and he kills 1,000 of them. His body count's stacking up. Listen, where this guy goes, destruction follows. You don't want to be in his path. And so then you get a little bit, can I just say, a little glimpse of maybe a little hope. After that, Samson, after this, is thirsty. This is in verse 18. He gets thirsty, and he does call on God. Only time I think we mention until the end that God's called upon. And he basically says, hey, you gave me this victory. Are you going to let me die of thirst? I'm not, did God, the Spirit of the Lord comes on him. Sure, it does. So, anyway, he drinks it, and God gives him water, much like he does for Israel on the Exodus, and he just kind of hangs out, right, for a little while. So that's lover number one story. It's a revenge story. It's not a love story. It's a revenge story. He chooses poorly. So, lover number two, starting in chapter 16. She gets a short story. She's called prostitute. She's a sex worker. She lives in a place called Gaza. Again, not Israelite territory necessarily. Maybe he just decided marriage was too, had too much to it. Sex was the thing. He'll just pay for the sex, right? Not get too involved, not get so messy, no in-laws, right? So he goes to this Philistine city of Gaza. News of Samson reaches the revenge-hungry Philistines who have been revenged by Samson, and they come to get the playboy to, kind of catch him in action, so to speak, if you know what I mean. So they're going to take him. And I don't know if Samson has a feeling, if the Spirit of God is upon him, if he gets wind of the coming trap for him. He doesn't stick around all night. He doesn't spend the night, right? And he does something really funny. This is another comical thing, but as he leaves Gaza, he literally takes the gate with him. I mean, so get the picture. City gate, iron gate, it's supposed to keep the bad guys out, right? He carries it. Now, there's a metaphor in biblical language and in the ancient Near East for victory. If you take the gate, you take the city, right? He literally took the gate, goes up on a hill and plants it and basically says, ha, 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 look what I did, right? Prankster, sophomoric pranks, refuses to grow up. Listen, all he's doing is poking the bear, right? He is just taunting them. And keep in mind, I think God orchestrates a lot of this. Trying to bring Israel to the point of crying out to God so they can be delivered, so they can get back on a better cycle. Never happens in Samson, right? It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. So that's lover number 2. She gets a short story, the funniest of the stories, I think, right? The gate story that comes through the Samson saga. And then we get to the one we all know, right? The Samson and Delilah story. Who remembers that movie, that black and white? Was that Victor Mature that was in there? I can't remember. It was a long time ago, right? You get that. All right. So we know about this lover, right? Samson and Delilah. Again, not a love story. This is a bit of a hedonistic, pleasure-seeking story again. Not a love story. Although he does say he fell in love, whatever that meant. I would love to change. I can't change the word, right? It's ahav in Hebrew. I would like to say he fell in lust, but perhaps he fell in love with Delilah. So it doesn't take long after he is connected to Delilah for the Philistines to come and say, hey, you got to find out how this guy rips gates off of cities and beats people to death with the jawbone of a donkey and rips lines apart. And, apparently, like Superman, bullets just fly off. Nothing, not a scratch on him. How does that happen? And so she starts on him. By the way, they offer her an enormous amount of money. 1,100 pieces of silver. So keep in mind, in Jesus' day, 30 pieces of silver would buy you a slave, right? And if you had enough to 1,100, you got a big labor force, right? This is wealth. This is not pennies, right? This is big money that they're trying to find out the secret of his strength. So Samson begins to play games again. Well, tell them this. If you get this kind of, right, these 7 bowstrings not dried up, they're like kryptonite. I'll just kind of wilt away. Yeah, I'll just be normal. I may only take down 2 at a time, not 1,000, right? I'm still kind of big. I'm still kind of Herculean in my physique, but nonetheless. Right? So they do that. He lets them tie him up. Of course, he breaks the strings. It doesn't say what he does to them. I'm just guessing. By the way, if you're a Philistine, do you want to be the one who goes and ties him up? I mean, what kind of trouble are you in that's your job to go do that? So pranks and games, right? Delilah's very upset. She makes fun of him. She bats her eyes. And said, oh, no, I told you wrong. It's not these bowstrings. It's rope. Go get rope. That's what it is. My mistake. Probably had, a broken Nazarite vow. Might have had too much to drink. That's what I meant. So, again, the whole saga comes. And, boom. Ropes break off his arm. Okay. Again, we don't know what happens to the people who tie him up. Delilah comes back again. You're mocking me. You're telling me lies. That's true. Right. Okay, listen, give me some dreadlocks. That's what you need to do. Just weave my hair and I'll become weak. So, Can you just get a picture of what that looks like, right? People weaving his hair, whether that's in a loom or actually just giving him dreadlocks. Like he's not going to wake up for that. Of course, again, he might have imbibed a bit. So, wake up, they're coming, and boom. That doesn't work either. So now, the pranks keep going. She's really going to put on the crocodile tears. Tell me, right? So she wears him down, nags him. He finally said, you know what, I've never been to the barbershop. And when that happens, they come in. I'm not sure how they get him. She had to be part of this, getting him bound, right? Seduced, intoxicated.
Doesn't it say that he fell asleep on her lap?
Yeah. To get him still, right? Cut the hair. So, that's probably a euphemism too. Fell asleep on her lap. And so then, Philistines come, wakes up, and he is indeed weak. And he gets tortured. Eyes gouged out, bronzed up. But I want you to look. Here's the key in verse 20. Then she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. When he awoke from his sleep, he thought, I will go out as other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So that Spirit of the Lord that was upon him, that was giving him all this strength, it really wasn't his hair, right? It was the Spirit of the Lord. The hair was the final straw, right, that happens. He gets done to him. He gets mocked as he mocked them. Revenge is not a very sweet dish, right? And Samson gets it. Eyes are gouged out. He's put to work like an animal. He turns to gristmill. But you know what they forgot? They forgot to call the barber in. Those Philistines. Oops. Somebody should have taken notes, right? They forgot. So, big celebration coming up. Going to celebrate the Philistine god, Dagon. By the way, Dagon's going to show back up in the history of Israel again. Going to parade Samson around and say, look, our God's better than your God. We got your boy. And so they brought Samson out to be a dog and pony show. And they put him between two pillars. And I'm trying to get a picture of what an ancient temple, an ancient amphitheater would look like, where, you got some kind of colonnade above. And that's where he is. So whatever they're making him do, dance an Irish river dance or whatever it is, Samson does once again for the second time now. Samson calls on God and asks to be remembered and to give him strength. Just one more time. But notice what he asked for. Not to be delivered, not to be set free. Let me have my revenge. Right. Revenge. So, and let me die with them. So there's 3,000 of them hanging around. Samson, one more time, the Spirit of God comes on him, although we don't get those words exactly. And what he does, right? Pushes the pillars, and it all comes tumbling down, and there you go. 3,000 at once. And then his brothers and his family come down and bury him. It's interesting, right? Because you don't hear anything else. For 20 years, he's a prankster. He doesn't really judge in the way we think. He doesn't really deliver. He seeks revenge and he pulls pranks. He is the embodiment. He is the embodiment of everyone does what is right in their own eyes. Right. Whatever it is that will please me, let me do it. Whatever truth is, let it be my truth. Whatever is right, let it be what I decide what is right. And listen, he is the judges. Now, I say all that, and then I have to say this, because I have to say this. He is listed in Hebrews 11 in the roll call of the faithful, right? When you read the verse, you decide what this means, right? I taught Hebrews this year. I'm still struggling with it. I struggle with it. I will continue to struggle with it. I will trust God with whatever this means. But here's verse 32 of Hebrews 11. After we hear about, by the way, Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and Moses. Okay, flawed people, but they kind of get it, right? They eventually get it. And then we hear about those that go on conquest, right? Reference to Joshua and the second generation that follows and obeys God. And then in verse 32 of Hebrews 11, and what more should I say? For time would fail to tell me of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah. All right, so Barak's associated with Deborah. But then it says, and of David and of Samuel the prophets. And listen to what they did. Whom through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions. Samson certainly did that. Quenched raging fire. He started them. Escaped the edge of the sword. Won strength out of weakness. Okay. Became mighty in war. Put foreign enemies to flight. Some of that's true, right, of Samson. The question is by faith in what for Samson? I don't get it, right? He does give God credit for the victory after the 1,000, right? And he does call on God for revenge with the 3,000. And maybe that's it, right? There is Samson does have to trust in God at some point in his life. Yeah, at some time, right? It doesn't mean that they get it right all the time. It doesn't mean that they're mostly obedient. It doesn't mean they show up for church every Sunday. Right? It means that at some point in their life, they had to trust completely in God. And maybe that's what faith is, what the Hebrew writer is trying to tell us with Hebrews chapter 11, by the way, is that what faith is about is realizing that how much you need God. So it's a sordid tale, okay? It's a sordid tale. And the whole book of Judges is mostly that. It starts out okay. It finds its zenith, I think, probably in Deborah. And it is just, listen, it's our times, though. The reason that I wanted to teach Judges is because in our culture in which we live, which is a very pluralistic culture, there's not one guiding ethic anymore. Pluralism, though, has its strength in diversity at times. When you live in a pluralistic world, it is so incumbent on the people of God to be the people of God. Okay. And in the period of Judges, in this pluralistic, me-first, humanistic world, they just never quite get it. Right? And so I think one of the reasons to study Judges is for us today to realize how crucial it is for us to depend on God to navigate culture. Listen, living in, and so I talked about originally that religious syncretism is one of the things that happens in Judges. You begin to take the worship and following of Yahweh and bring these other gods into it, right? And kind of paganize God's truth. And syncretism works in organizations. When you start doing that and you get into the ethic and the morality and the teachings of Jesus, and you bring pluralistic syncretism into it, it dilutes the witness of the church. Right? I'm not saying we have to stand on the street corner yelling "turn or burn." Right? Matter of fact, just the opposite. But we have to be an influence of positive witness to Jesus in our culture. That is, to hold to our convictions and still be able to love neighbor. To hang on to that Jesus is Lord while we live among people who don't think about Jesus ever. And one of the failures of the period of Judges is I don't know that they ever got over that hump to be a faithful witness to Yahweh. They had moments, right? We have a few people that are highlighted as, the real hero of Judges is God, but the real heroes of Judges are not Samson and Gideon and Jephthah, right? And the real heroes are Deborah and Yael, who defeats Sisera, and the unnamed mother of Samson, and the unnamed woman who takes out Abimelech, and those that even through oppression said, no, we're going to follow God. That's the heroes of Judges, which weren't very many. Okay, it was dark. It was a dark time. The other thing of Judges is this, and this is what gives me some hope, is God continues to use flawed people to carry out the mission. So, and listen, there's some flawed people in Judges, and God's mission is still carried out, mostly. Except in Samson, there's no deliverance.
So another thing about this story is counterculture. God using counterculture to accomplish it.
Right.
So Noah's wife doesn't have a name.
Right.
She's the one who overcomes Noah's disbelief.
Yeah. Yeah, she's the faithful one. Right.
She believed.
Right.
God had come and spoken to her, and all that was going to happen.
Right.
And Noah doubted.
He's not sure, right? And then when he realizes it is, he gets really afraid, right? He gets paralyzed. That was God. What do we do?
And it's her,
Yeah.
named wife, that says,
Yeah.
he wanted to get you.
Yeah, you'd already be gone, right? You would already be gone.
Bob was thinking about today about the Israelites and it's the same Gaza, Palestinians.
Yeah, so that is really interesting. So the monotheistic religions of the world, right? Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all come from Yahweh. And so, it's I do wonder, kind of, when folks who are in the Jewish tradition or Islamic tradition, when they read these stories, what do they think about modernity and where we are as well? I think we have to think about Judges because humanism, which is really where I think we're moving into abject humanism, and that is you are your own God, right? You set your own morality, you set your own ethic, and if we can become like Samson, if it's pleasing to us, so what? I don't care what it does to you. It becomes a very self-centered world. Listen, I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm not throwing in the towel and there's no hope, right? What I'm saying, I think it's that we have to be aware of the things going on in our culture and not be derailed by that. In the mission of God, our mission is still the same, right? To be salt and light to the world, for the sake of the world, to bear faithful witness to Jesus, when it would be really easy not to. Okay. It would be really easy just to say, you know what, I just think I'll just do it my way, or I'll do what I want, or I'll please myself today, right? The ultimate ego trip, right? Anyway, I think it's a great cautionary tale. Judges is for any culture that decides that God is irrelevant, because that's basically what happens, right? God becomes irrelevant until God is forced to be relevant by other forces. So there's some characters in here, though, right? There's some characters, and obviously, I do think that as the story goes on, as the story of Judges goes on, the overlying ethic and integrity of the people become less and less connected to Yahweh. And they finally just say, right, risk gonna do. I mean, it's where Judah is. Well, the Philistines rule over us. I mean, even Gideon said, "No, I can't be your ruler. God's your ruler." And then by the time that Samson comes around, Judah, which by the way is the tribe, right, the tribe that Jesus comes from, says, "Yeah, the Philistines are our ruler." They just gave up in their own way. And maybe that's my admonitions: don't give up in a culture that looks dark. And listen, there's some dark spots, and no doubt. We're in a bit of a mess right now. Okay, but God's still God, right? And the tomb's still empty, and Jesus is still Lord. And so I think we just live that way. So